Hey everybody. Thank you for being here today. Like Crystal said, I have been at the museum. Let's see, the first time that I was at the museum in a like official capacity was probably fall of 2014 when I was doing my high school senior project here. Um, and since then, you guys haven't been able to get rid of me. So I've been the registrar here since 2023, and um, my main duties here include kind of processing and taking care of the physical collections, both on display but also in storage. Um, so I remember coming to the museum as a child, and I think, like a lot of children, I was very intrigued by the kind of larger than life history that I was seeing here. Things like the train that's inside, and the trolley car, and the Petersburg boat. When I was coming here, volunteering as a teenager, I started to see more of the individual stories that actually make up the past. And now, working at Augusta Museum of History as an adult, I understand that those stories are what carry the heart and soul of our past. So, when it came to decide what I wanted to talk about for this lecture, as we've been talking about family stories all year, I kind of wanted to focus on one of the family based collections that we have. Uh, so, today I'm going to be talking about the McMurphy family collection that we have. It's one of the family collections that was one of the earliest, like, large family collections that came to the museum back in about 2014. And uh, today I'm just going to share some stories from the McMurphy family, whose objects and archives stretch over the course of about 3 generations, and further back than that. So, our story kind of begins with Gilbert Lafayette McMurphy. He was born in 1835, and that is a picture of him here when he was much older, obviously. He is the son of Daniel McMurphy, who first came to the Georgia, South Carolina area in 1737 from County Antrim, Ireland. So Gilbert, I believe, was raised more in this area, but he found himself living in Galveston, Texas when the Civil War broke out. And like just about every one of his peers, who was a man at the time, he fought for the Confederate Texas Cavalry. That is his Southern Cross of Honor that we have in our collection as well. He was awarded that probably 1910 to 1920 as part of the Veterans Recognition Program for the Confederacy. He does write down years later an account of his experience in the war that he addresses specifically to his children. So this is a memoir that is pretty short overall. It doesn't account for his entire experience in the war, but he writes down some of the memories that stick out most strongly to him, that he wants his children to kind of hold on to as he's aging. So he joins the military, and in the introduction to his memoir, he specifically mentions a few times that he doesn't really want to get into the causes of the Civil War or make any personal statements on that, but he does say of the war that it was difficult, especially in the training and in the camp life that he experienced. He talks about the limited food that the regiment experienced in the camp out of Galveston, and often having to resort to unclean water sources, which he drank from this tin cup, also in our collection. He writes of his fellow soldiers often hunting possum and groundhog. In case anyone is wondering, he does say that groundhog is fine as long as it's in a stew with seasoning. He also writes of not having been a particularly fine horseman at the time, and that at one point his horse got spooked and threw him off into the Louisiana bayou, where he nearly drowned due to being weighed down with all his equipment. But he lives. At one point, he also writes about being sent to a hospital in Nashville after contracting pneumonia during a measles outbreak in his regiment. this is sort of the type of memories that he recalls from his time during the war. Um, I think that most telling, though, he says that, to quote, "To go into a school of instruction on the stern realities of war looks much better on paper than the actual experience." Helen Joseph Cooper McMurphy, born Helen Joseph Cooper, married Gilbert in May of 1866. This is her wedding photo. The caption on the back of this, believe this is either a daguerreotype or an ambrotype, so printed on either glass or silver. I think this one's printed on glass. On the back of this is written that she married Gilbert in 1866 in Augusta. She was from Augusta. His father grew up in this area. And while they were married by a Baptist minister, it seemed that for the rest of their lives, they were pretty devout Catholics, likely due to Gilbert's background as like his father being from Ireland and as of Irish Catholic descent. So they were married in Augusta, 1866, by a Baptist minister. Then she went home with Gilbert to Galveston, Texas. Later on, they did make their way back to Augusta, though, where they were members of St. Patrick's Church. Let's see. Now, when it comes to Helen Cooper McMurphy, we don't have as much information about her. Sadly, she would pass away at only 34 years old. However, one of the legacies that she leaves in our collection is her handwritten recipe book, which I have to say is one of the more well-used cookbooks that I've seen in our collection. Both covers have come off. The reason that I'm able to scan individual pages like that is because that's most of what's left. It really isn't bound together anymore. But these recipes include various breads, pickles, meats, fruit dishes, recipes written on scraps of paper as well as cut out of newspapers. The pages, as you can see, are well spotted with water stains, age, and use. The other thing that is interesting is that as you go through, while this book starts in 1866 when Helen was married, the recipes date all the way up to the 1900s. So we can presume that her family members or other people that she knew continued to add to this book after her death. I would assume her two daughters did, as well as possibly further descendants. You can also tell that it was used by multiple people and that the early pages are written in a very distinct hand. And then you have these later kind of insert pages that are clearly written by someone entirely else. You have pen, you have pencil. In some places where the ink has started to fade, people have gone over and traced over the letters again in different ink so that the words wouldn't be lost. In several places, there are little drawings that seems like perhaps a child got a hold of the page there, but it's a beautiful little recipe book with a lot of personality that belonged to Helen. So that is sort of her legacy in this collection. Another legacy and story that kind of pertains to this family is kind of the strong faith that they clearly had, which we can see in a lot of different places. But one of the kind of most interesting that I find are these two different pieces, both from our collection. This is a portrait of Helen Cooper McMurphy, and she's pretty young here. We think that this is probably either around the time of their marriage or a little bit after. And it's hard to see on the projector, but she is wearing a little three-piece set of a black cross necklace and two earrings. And this is that jewelry set framed. So we have both the painting of her wearing those pieces as well as the jewelry themselves as part of our collection. Helen and Gilbert had 5 children. I'm going to say a lot of names, and a lot of them went by their middle names, so we're just going to run through them real quick. We had Charles Augustus. He went by Charles. James Lawrence, who went by Lawrence. Daniel Ducott, who went by Ducott, Helen Joseph McMurray, named for her mother, she went by Helen, and Catherine Adele McMurphy, she went by Adele. So these are kind of the children in play of the next generation. Um, and the family's strong sense of faith can also be seen in the possessions of the children. So we have several prayer books. This one was owned by Ducott. I believe it was given to him when he was maybe like 6 years old or so. He was born in, let's see, he was born in 1870, and the book was published 73. His name is written on it with a little inscription that says 76. So this probably would have been his childhood prayer book. And as we can see, it's very worn, it's very well used, whether by him or by subsequent generations of the family. We also have Adele McMurphy's prayer book from the 1880s through 1900s. It's actually part of a set of two little pocket prayer books that have both scripture and hymns in them. And they're also pretty well worn. As for the two eldest McMurphy sons, this is Charles and Lawrence. We don't have as much information about Lawrence, but we do know that eventually he did move to Atlanta with his brother Charles, and they went into business together. And this is the photo that we have of Lawrence. Personally, I think he looks like his father, and he is this young man lying right here. Again, it's a little hard to see, but this photograph is titled Office Folks, and then it has a little arrow pointing to him. So I'm not sure if these are people from the business that he and Charles were running, or if these are more business associates from an office that he had previously worked in. But that's Brother Lawrence right there. We also have from the McMurphy Company from the like 1910s and teens, we have this letterhead, and it advertises cleaning, like cleaning and sanitation polish. I'm not sure if they sold anything else or if this was the special, but this is for the McMurphy Company. And up at the top, we can see C.A. McMurphy and J.L. McMurphy. So this is from the business that they had together up in Atlanta, as well as Lawrence's eyeglasses from probably towards the end of his life, like 1930s, early 40s. Now, the majority of the paper archives that we have from the McMurphy family consist of the illustrated poetry that Charles would write. Oftentimes, these are poems that he would send enclosed with letters to his youngest sister, Adele. And a few different examples of these. Now, these are mostly ink, some pencil, but mostly ink and watercolor. But he would typically paint scenes of nature, some religious themes, as well as a very charming trapeze artist that you can see them kind of soaring above an arena here. Now, he would write to Adele, often in short little letters that we have in our collection. His letters will mention typically childhood memories or just general remarks about daily life to his sister Adele, and it seems like every time he accompanies them with a couple verses of poetry. One letter that he sent her, most of these are kind of from the 1920s era, but one letter he sent his sister Adele in 1920 recalls, when Lawrence Ducott and myself were barefooted boys going across the river from Augusta to drive the cows home from milking, you were a tiny little girl. However, you may imagine that you do remember, for often, no doubt, we confuse memory with things that have often been told to us. He also wrote poems about things that were kind of happening that Adele would tell him about. Adele was a school teacher. She graduated from Tubman in, 1891. She graduated, and she was a school teacher in this area. So she had evidently written to him at some point, telling him that she had up to 77 students in her class that year. And he writes her a poem that says, 77 in all your bunch, you can take this little hunch. Should you draw a family tree, lots of branches there will be. 77, great Scott, Adele. When you ring the recess bell, won't you have an awful time to get the playful bunch in line? And there were a few more verses, but that's just sort of the cadence with which he kind of writes his sister. Another humorous little poem that he wrote that I thought was funny, titled Nourishment. He writes, the protein may not balance with the calories the foods include, but who the devil figures that when in a hungry mood? So he definitely had a lot of personality and would communicate that through the written word. Now, Charles was not the only poet in the family. His younger sister Adele, or his younger sister Helen, who was just a bit older than Adele, once wrote to him, "Oh, you Charles McMurphy, you think you are so smart. At composing poetry, you think you've got the art. All right for you, Sir Charlie. Just come down a step or two, and when you read my poetry, admit I've talent too." Helen is another character that we have less information about. Tragically, she would also pass away young, much like the mother she was named after, at just 32 years old in 1904. The grief of losing his mother and sister is evident in Charles's poems. He has one titled In Memoria that is here that depicts a young woman as an angel. Again, possibly composed in remembrance of his sister, possibly his mother. Now, as for the remaining brother, Daniel Ducat McMurphy, or Ducat as he was called, he had 4 children, all of them daughters. The first daughter, Caroline, can be seen here in the arms of her grandfather, Gilbert. And I believe this would have been in 1900. She was born in 1899, but she would have been about, I think, 9 months old or so in this photo. So this would have been like early 1900 when this was taken. Daniel Ducat's second daughter was born in 1904, and whoopsie. And her aunt Adele, who received so many poems from Charles, has a handwritten account of the baby's birth. So she records kind of, length, weight, talks about, when she first opened her eyes and how happy the family was, and just sort of a general specific memoir account of her niece being born. Now, it's important to note that this baby was born just 17 days before her Aunt Helen passed away. The baby was named Helen in her honor, and this becomes particularly poignant when flipping through the pages of this memoir, because someone had put a newspaper clipping of Aunt Helen's eulogy in between the pages of the baby book. Now, baby Helen did grow up in Augusta. She is seen here. This is her wedding portrait from the 1920s. In 1924, she also graduated from Mount St. Joseph. I think she stayed in the area. Ducat also had 2 more daughters. The third daughter, named Celeste, unfortunately only lived 2 years. She passed away in 1908. But the fourth daughter, Catherine, lived to 1996, and Catherine's daughter is actually the donor of this collection. So this year, we have seen how family stories allow us to connect with the past, not just as something static and unmoving, but something that is as alive as the people who preserved the memories that we share, and the memories that we share of the people who came before us. History is not merely objects and archives, but it's stories that accompany them. And for every story within these walls, there are 1,000 more being preserved in those memories. So preservation does come in acid-free boxes and digitization, sure, but it also comes in the ways that we pass that knowledge down. As Dr. Caldwell said in the introduction of this year's series, history is inextricably linked to storytelling. And those stories not only preserve the past, but they allow us to have a conversation with it, an active exchange of memory and presence. I have one more story that I'd like to share with you today. Myra Amelia Stover was born near Coburn, Pennsylvania in 1892. She was raised by an aunt and uncle, went to college, and got a teaching certificate. This was urged by her aunt and uncle because they wanted her to always have a way to support herself. In 1913, she married Robert Breon, a photographer who ran a studio in State College, Pennsylvania. Together, they had 4 children, 3 sons between 1916 and 1921, and then in 1937, much later and quite by surprise, a daughter. They named her Helen, unrelated to all the Helens we've talked to today, just another Helen. Helen grew up in State College, Pennsylvania. She married her high school sweetheart, Carl Volz, in 1958. She attended Penn State University, obtained a doctorate in human development, worked as a speech pathologist, and raised 2 children with Carl, Kira and Frederick. Now, Kira was working in a department store in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania in the late 80s when she met a young man named Mark who was in town visiting his parents. He had gone to school at Widener University outside of Philadelphia and was recruited by DuPont to work at a nuclear plant down south back in 1981. They dated long distance before it was cool, and Kira moved down to Georgia in 1989. They got married in 1991. Now, Mark worked at SRS for 42 years, and Kira taught in the Richmond County school system for 29. They had 2 daughters, the eldest of whom grew up to work at the Augusta Museum of History. I never met my great-grandmother Myra, but I have never felt as though I do not know her. In the stories we tell, the pictures we keep, and the century-old sugar cookie recipe that we make every year without fail, her memory is very much alive. In this way, the past speaks to us, and it is always worth a listen. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, there's my parents. Fairy stone. Could you describe what a fairy stone is? Because I might know it by a different name.
They occur in one area in southwestern Virginia.
Interesting.
And they are stones that show up in the form of little carved crosses, like
Oh,
like
wow.
in those pictures. I
Gotcha.
doubt from that they would be, but they look so much like them.
It's possible. It's also possible if that's like a like known kind of lore there that they might be trying to mimic them. I'm not sure. I believe what they're made out of is jet, which is like a almost like a fossilized wood material. And a lot of times when you see it, like it's jet black, like those really black kind of not quite stone, but not quite wood, like bead materials that are made, especially kind of in the mid 1800s. That's probably what it's made out of. But yeah, it's like we have the little like framed jewelry set from her, which is nice.
I think that's what fairy stones are.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's a neat material. I have to also emphasize that what I've shown from the McMurphy collection is not even a tenth of it. It's just kind of what I was able to put together that would make sense to fit within 30 minutes, which I hope I stuck to. I think I did. So, yeah, no, there's over 60 different items, and that's not including the archive, which is like tens of pages. So, yeah. I don't know. That would be up to Nancy. It is. It's a great story, and I wanted to kind of link like how I think sometimes history takes turns that result in seemingly unrelated events like sugar cookies being made in Pennsylvania connects to Augusta through, SRS was recruiting and our family's here.
I will say that because Alena is speaking today, her be on YouTube.
Yeah.
For the rest of eternity.
So our mission deals with collecting and preserving and interpreting the story of Augusta and its surrounding counties. So the 6 kind of primary counties of the CSRA are usually what we're dealing with. Um, Within that, you know, it's just a matter of kind of seeing if it's subject matter that we already have represented in the collection, but we're always happy to consult with folks who may have something of interest. And if not, we usually try to direct them to where they could take their items for sure.
One more round, please.
Thank you.